Trevor Hall, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. Man, you grew up in South Carolina, I believe, and you grew up in a relatively musical family. Is that right? Did your old man play a little bit?
Yeah, my dad is a drummer, still plays, you know, plays in church and plays with like his local bands. Um, and yeah, has always been a music man. So growing up, he was definitely a huge influence, had a huge record collection that I used to love, kind of, you know, running through. And yeah, I was just always exposed to a lot of different types of music from a very, yeah, young age.
That's really cool. So, I mean, that can go one of two ways. But to you, it wasn't like a bummer or uncool that your dad was playing. You were kind of into the stuff that he was doing.
For sure, I was super into what he was doing, and he was always very like just supportive of any type of genre I was into. I remember bringing him like a Blink 182 album. Hey, how do I drum like this? And my dad was put on the cans and tried to like imitate Travis Barker or something.
Amen.
So he was always supportive of whatever kind of music I was into. Um, and I was deeply, just as influenced by music he was into. He was very much into like the Allman Brothers, the Doobie Brothers, um, a lot of like Earth, Wind and Fire, stuff like that. It was great to have those influences early on.
That's right. And it sounds like you kind of followed in his footsteps at first and were playing drums at first.
I was definitely like banging on the drums first. Um, and then I was kind of bouncing all over the place. I just loved music, and I was just trying anything and everything. And I was trying like the trombone and trying the bass guitar, and my parents were like so supportive of any type of thing I wanted to go after. Would
Yeah.
drive me back and forth to the music store to like rent the next instrument for a couple days. Um, but then I eventually kind of settled. I settled on the guitar because I wanted to write songs, and the guitar was obviously a one of the go-to instruments to do that. Um, and that was probably around, yeah, maybe like 11 or 12. I started to kind of stick with the guitar and uh, and learn the tunes that I loved.
Wow, that's pretty early on to decide that you wanted to kind of compose 11 or 12.
Yeah, it wasn't like I decided. I just it just was like it just came so like I remember just coming home from school every day and going up we had this like little room above the garage, and my dad's drums were in there, and like I set up a little music stand, and I would just like after school, I just looking back on it, I'd be up there for a couple hours after school just with my notebooks writing, just right. It was almost more of like this just shelter haven for me. I wasn't so much thinking like this is what I want to do, this is what I you know want to go after. um it was more of just for that pure like connection with like music and discovering this world of imagination. And it was really special at that age to have that.
It's really cool to hear you describe that. I have kids of my own now, and I'm interested in them playing music, not so that they'll join the music business. I certainly don't want them to do that.
Yeah,
But just this idea of being
I
like a
second
young
that.
kid. Yeah, yeah. So okay, so you sign on for that as well.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about there, because I had a very similar experience at a young age of being able to go in a room and be in solitude and be by yourself, and yet not be on a device, not be, hooked into your phone, but be in solitude and at the same time doing something, being involved in something, participating in something. And music is, well, I have a feeling human beings have been doing that for a couple thousand years. So
Yeah, for sure. That's really beautiful way you put it like that. Um, I'm lucky to have had parents that supported that aspect, supported that space, for me. Um,
yeah,
so it was very important. It was that. It was a place of solitude for me. It was a place of learning about myself. Um, learning how to be with my emotions, express them, feel them. And I just think that's so important for kids, um, because outside of that, I grew up in it was a very beautiful place, lovely place, but there wasn't a lot of access to the arts or other ways of expressing your feelings. It was very much about sports and, you know, going to college and, in the South and, you know, it was just very kind of, dress code and prep school. And so that time after school to have that space was just so incredibly important for me.
Man, you are what you're saying there is hitting home with me. You would eventually you'd eventually go away to school for a little while. What seems like what was a pretty formative period for you because you were studying, I believe specifically like classical guitar, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So you had this twin thing of where you're studying classical guitar and then at the same time you're in California. So you kind of begin to get introduced to this kind of Eastern mystical tradition, which I believe is now a formal religious practice for you at this time in your life. But at that time, you were kind of discovering these two twin interests of like classical guitar and Eastern mysticism. Can you kind of talk about that formative part of your life and what that discovery was like?
oh yeah, I mean that was a beautiful time of my life. I mean, just very cherished years. um I gosh, where to begin? Yeah, I went to a boarding art school, high school in California, a place called Idlewild Arts, and it was up in the mountains above, kind of Palm Springs and Palm Desert. Very beautiful place, very very mystical place up there. It's most people don't know it's up there, and up in the woods there was this international boarding art school where kids from all over the world, and it was like this little village. And coming from a prep school into this kind of place that was way more focused on your art and your expression, it was just my whole soul kind of just burst open. And um, I was on fire, with all of the inspiration I was getting every single day. um, and then, that on the other end, I was opened up spiritually, um, because one of my best friends at school, Sam Marcus, he had a photo of an Indian mystic on his wall, and I just saw the photo, and I just kind of felt this just super familiar feeling I've never really felt, and I asked him who it was, and he said, "Oh, he was this Indian yogi, and my dad and my brother were with him." In like the 70s, and through that kind of doorway and learning about this mystic, um, learning about India, learning about kind of the spiritual just heritage and the richness of the culture, um, that was opening me up and as a person, and just those it was just this kind of collision of all these just big energies in my life, big inspirations in my life coming together at that time. And it was just such a beautiful, joyous time. Um,
Now,
yeah,
this is a thread I want to pull on, and I want to get back eventually to kind of like your chronological development
yeah,
as an artist. But I think that this is as good a time as any
yeah,
to pull on this thread because I'm very interested in this intersection of like a religious faith or a religious practice
yeah,
meeting an artistic practice. So for me, someone who is not familiar with kind of Eastern mysticism or Hinduism in any way, how
yeah.
would you how would you describe the practice, and how does it differ from more Western practices of religion and faith?
Well, it's funny because I never really thought of what I was getting into as like religious in any way. That word sometimes makes me like, ugh, because
Fair
I think
enough.
it
Fair
takes
enough.
this kind of connotation of um, just I don't know. It just has that vibe,
Rigidity and yes,
rigidity.
yeah.
I think, yeah, that's the word. And the special thing about seeing this picture was of this saint was it was just based on like love. It was based on reading stories about him and falling in love with this miraculous, just beautiful being. I wasn't almost even thinking of God. I was just like loving this figure that I had never met, and I'm this kid from like South Carolina, and now imagine me coming home for spring break to my parents and like being all like crazy about this Indian yogi. They were like, "What the hell is going on?"
You're not going to that school anymore,
Yeah,
dude. Yeah.
but oh my God, they were so beautiful and so supportive, because they saw how much it inspired me. Um, and I wanted to love everything this he loved, because I was in love with him, so because he was from India, I wanted to know more about India, because he was, um, you know, chanting the holy name of Ram. I went, oh, what is this holy name of Ram? And it was all just because of I wanted to love everything he loved, and that was kind of the that was the doorway into my love for India, my travels to India, um, and things like this. But to kind of answer your question a little better, more directly, um, being that I don't so much think of it as like a religion, it's just like my life. There's so many different rivers that merge into this formless, shoreless ocean of divine energy, you know, and it all goes to the same thing. And in India, there's so many different traditions, some that contradict each other, that agree with each other, that you know, but they're all in the end they all for the most part accept that there's so many different paths that lead to that oneness, that great spirit, that God of your understanding, Um, and I've always been interested in the path of love or the path of devotion. Um, and India has this rich, rich culture of these devotional poets and these devotional singers who their songs are still sung today. One of my favorites is the Saint Kabir, who I have two songs, Kabir 1 and Kabir 2, that are based off some of his poetry and his songs. And that's what I started to fall in love with. I started to fall in love with these kind of wild songsters, that were kind of renegades that had this special just love, divine love that was just pouring out of them, and they were expressing that through their songs and through their imageries and their poetry. It was just a magical world to me. And being a musician, it consequently just rubbed off on how I looked at music and how I looked at what it was for me in my life. Um, but that is the tradition. That is the tradition that I was mainly inspired by from in going to India and kind of getting more involved in the Indian culture and Indian spirituality.
Man, you have no idea, just from that talk right there, you have no idea what a perfect guest you are for this podcast. You're right
Oh,
up my
thank
alley,
you.
right here. So, because, with you talking about that, I see all these interesting intersections with, as you talk about like people who are saints, who are following like a path of love, a path of
Uh-huh.
devotion. Like the Western equivalent of that would be the Western saint of St. Augustine, who said
Right.
something very similar, which was, you are what you love. What you love is your destiny. Now, in Western culture, there's a little bit more of a binary, because what he's saying is you can love something, you can love good or you can love evil, and you can go either one of those ways. So
Uh-huh.
it is a bit different, but just that idea that you are what you love, and that is what your final destiny will be. I mean, I identify with that very
Yeah.
deeply, and it's part of my artistic practice, and it's just beautiful to hear you articulate it like that, man.
Oh, thank you so much. We didn't get to jump into it before because you were just like, let's just hop into it. But like,
Yeah.
it's so crazy that I'm talking to you right now because I've been like such a fan for like such a long time, and y- uh, the way I found your music was just in a really beautiful way, and kind of starting this journey again of I'm coming out with a new project and like starting to open up a little more and talk to different people, and different things are being presented to me. And um, when my manager sent like your podcast or show or just conversation, Joe Pug, I was like, wait, wait, the singer, like, and he
Yeah.
was like, yeah, and I just completely melted. I told my wife, I was like, babe, you're not gonna believe who I get to talk to, you know. So
Fantastic.
yeah, it's just the connection is there before, but anyway,
Right on. Well, right on.
I don't want to gloat on you too much, but
Well, man, I can do lots of things in life pretty well, but take a compliment is not one of them. So I'm going to have to move on. Um, now, there would be, I assume, and from what I've read a bit about you, there is on top of this, there's like a physical practice of this, which is yoga, but also meditation. Were you starting to learn that meditation then? And if so, how did meditation and yoga in that way change your life? Not just artistically, it can be personally as well.
yeah, that was another, I think, magical thing that was happening during those years when I was at school. I had a teacher up there that was a devotee, that was a practitioner, and had been to India, many times before, and I really looked up to him, and he was very, um, you know supportive in my interest in these things, And he would meditate every morning in the dorm, in his room, and he eventually invited me, said, "Hey, if you ever want to come in and sit with me before the day, I'll just keep my door unlocked, And it was really inspiring, those mornings. I remember them so clearly, just those early days, first going down and just sitting for the first time. And I became very kind of obsessed with, yeah, like meditation. Um, and I was very like serious about waking up early and doing it, even at that like young age. But I do remember that the first time I sat, and I remember with him, the first time I sat with him, and opening my eyes and starting my day. I remember that like walk to breakfast, and I was like, whoa, like something is different in my person, in my um, vision, or just outlook on the day. And I was really affected by that, and that kind of clarity, or that space that it gave me. And that's what I became like hungry for. Um, and that's why I kept going after it, and starting to kind of learn about different practices of meditation. And um, it just became a really important part of my life. I'm a super sensitive guy, and I was like a very sensitive kid, like overly sensitive kid, and didn't know a lot of ways to kind of protect my energy at that especially being that young, um, and for being somebody that's just kind of uh, didn't know how to, yeah, draw boundaries, or wash myself off of different of the energies of the day, or setting myself up for success. Meditation became this thing for me, like music. Music has the same effect of um, kind of bringing me into a witness, um, a place of being the witness, and creating space in my mind, in my being, in my heart, um, so that I can, live in a better way.
What is being the witness? What do you mean when you say that?
I think like not being controlled so much by all the stories that go on in my head, it's like,
Yeah.
just the things that we spin out about, the things that we ruminate about, different emotions, rather than it's not a thing of cutting those things off. Um, it's that's something that I had to learn. It's not something of cutting out your emotions or things like this. It's just not being controlled, I think, as much by them, being in a place of freedom in oneself to watch them come and watch them go. And um, it's hard to put into words. I am just a beginner. I consider myself such a beginner in the practice of meditation. So just a little bit that I've from my own experiences, it just creates such a sense of space, um,
Hmm.
and in that space, there's a lot of potentiality for different ways of thinking or different ways of feeling. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you
yeah,
describe that walk to breakfast after meditation. I think about,
yeah,
a walk, after prayer or something like that, and it
yeah.
reminds me of this quote. I think it's attributable to Carl Jung when he said, "Man does not see God because he does not look low enough." And that is, I find that prayer or meditation, they bring you to a place where you can recognize the holiness of just walking to damn breakfast, man. I
Oh,
mean, there's a lot of
100%.
holy things to behold in that moment.
Yeah, I think that the bet like one of the best ways to reach a divine energy or quickly is to bring yourself into the present moment and bringing yourself into that blissful energy into every single action. It's not a sense of cutting off uh, the world or cutting off your emotions and you know walking 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. you know um, Other great beings I think did those things for us so we didn't have to do them.
Yep.
I
Yep.
think being present in this moment, um, feeling the miracle of being alive is the best way to kind of access, I think, or not the best way, it's just a good way to quickly access that sense of divinity. And I also think it's the best gift we can offer people around us is that sense of presence, that sense um, of just being there. Being in every moment. Especially, now becoming a dad, it's like I've really been meditating on that a lot. It's like, what is the best thing I can offer my son? You know, um, and it always comes back to that sense of presence, that sense of just being there. Um,
Yes.
those are the people that have influenced my life the greatest is being with people that are truly just with me in the moment. it's
How old's your son?
He's 2 and like 3 months. 2 and 3
Two and three
months.
months. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that sense of being there. I have three kids under six, and that sense of being there is really important. I always try to look at it as there's that really short Philip Larkin poem that just goes, "Your parents, they fuck you up. They don't mean to, but they do."
Yeah.
And I always think about that like, well, look, I'm a very, very, very flawed individual. So I am going to fuck them up in some ways for
Right.
sure. But as long as I as long as I do try to be present as much as
Yeah.
possible, physically, but you're right, like mentally and with attention, because you can be in the same room with a kid, and if you're on your damn Black Mirror device
Yeah.
sucked into Instagram, then sorry, but you're not there.
Yeah.
And I'm the first person that's guilty of that, to be sure. But yeah, that presence, they respond to it. They respond to it like it's a kind of magic.
They truly do, and my wife and I just had this conversation, of being guilty of, hey, we gotta engage a bit more. We don't want to fall into this kind of, unhealthy cycle of just, turning on a show all day or whatever it might be, or, you know,
Yeah,
um, and we made the change even just a couple nights ago, and have noticed such a huge change, not only in
yeah,
him and ourselves, that sense of connection. Um, so
Well,
so anyway, that
so
it's
now
just
I've talked to you. Now
yeah.
I've talked to you about all the things that I personally wanted to talk to you, and I think we've probably lost all the listeners because this is a songwriting podcast. So let me,
Oh no,
now that I've
I'm
taken the detour that I wanted to take, um, let's get back to the main story. So you're about 16, 17 years old. You're away at the
uh-huh.
school, classical guitar. Your life is exploding spiritually,
Uh-huh.
and then in a very precocious way, you record your first album when you're not even 18 years old yet.
Mm.
And from there, you signed with Geffen Records very
Yeah.
early on. Can you kind of describe that creative output, that first one, and then
Uh,
how things just took off so auspiciously for you to begin with?
yeah, auspiciously, I don't, it it didn't. It was a very interesting time because that period from it was 2002 to about 2005, I was at school. That was that time of just beautiful creative explosion and opening of the soul and an artist. Um, and I signed my deal with Geffen, yes, my senior year. So I graduated high school and moved right down into LA. Um,
Wow.
didn't know anybody really. All my friends have dispersed, right? Because they're all from all over the world. And now I'm living in my own apartment alone. Um, and just, signed this big deal and started recording my, first record like right away. Um, it wasn't as glamorous as people may think. I was incredibly lonely. Um,
Mm.
I didn't, I couldn't go out anywhere because I was underage, right? And I wasn't in school or some type of thing to meet anybody. So um, it was weird. I was hanging out with my manager and all their friends pretty much. And I'm this young kid, who's just trying to also be a kid and figure out who he is. I got all these other people, these older people, my quote peers, telling me what I should do and you know how I should sound maybe and what I should look. So it was a lot, um, and I was thrown into that kind of major label machine, which was just all over the place. Um, and what happened was in my journey, I recorded this record, um, and right after I recorded the record, the president of the label at the time, uh, they brought in a new president, um, and that the current president went elsewhere. And that happened all the time in major labels. Like God, it's happened. As soon as I get a connection with this person, they leave, and I got to start from scratch. That's kind of what happened. Um, and that president was Ron Fair. Ron Fair came in. Um, and again, I'm just a kid. I don't know who anybody is. I'm just like, just trying to eat, and he came in, and I had to kind of win him over, which I did, but he didn't like the album I made, so he said, "I want you to make another record." So I said, "Okay." At this point, I'm like, just want to do something, because
Mhm.
we were kind of been in this limbo for a while, and
What did that feel like though to have worked? You're lonely, you're out in LA by yourself, you're,
mhm,
eating tuna fish sandwiches and heading to the studio and hanging with your manager and their friends. It's like,
mhm.
what did that feel like to hear like, everything you just did here, it's not going to work. Toss it.
It was, it was, you know, I really didn't have a voice at that time, unfortunately. I was so young. Didn't know what was right, what was wrong. Um, to be honest, I was kind of just like excited to get something going,
Yeah.
because we had recorded that previous album, and we were when that president left, it was like we were in like this holding pattern for like a year, you know
Oh, wow.
so it was just like I'm and they had dropped when that new president came in. They had dropped a lot of people on the label. They didn't drop me. They were just like, you got to make something new. And so I was like, this is great. let's get something going.
Hmm.
And Ron Fair had introduced me to Abe Laboriel Jr. and his brother Mateo, who are very just incredible guys and talented guys. And I was just happy to be with these amazing guys and to do a new record, you know. And by that time, I had plenty of other songs because it was so long, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah.
it's just a long time. So I made a whole new album with them, and over and you know, it was ready to put it out. We picked cover art design, shot like a music video even, and you know, seems like I had the support of the label and everything. And then about a month before the record was going to come out, they dropped me from the label, um, and kept that album as well.
Kept them
So
both.
kept them
Do they
both.
still
Yeah,
own them?
they do. Yeah. Um,
And
so
they've never seen
it's
the light of day?
well, that record somehow, that second record I just mentioned, somehow got like leaked somehow onto the internet. Um,
But no official release
but
by.
no, so, yeah, so those songs are out there, or those recordings are out there, but there was no official release or anything like that. And at first, I couldn't even re-record those songs. That was part of the clause, which was just complete fucking bullshit. It's like, if you don't believe in me, if you don't
Then
believe in the songs,
yeah.
why are you holding on to them? Just give them back to me. Like, it's,
Yes.
you know, we'll even pay them. You know, we'll pay for them. Like, you know, like, no, they're just like
Yeah.
being, you know, assholes, to be honest. So it was just like so stupid. And then eventually, after I think like a year later or so, my manager got the re-recording clause removed. But by that time, I was so bitter with all that stuff. You know, it was like I'm
Yeah.
not re-recording any of it. I think I re-recorded one song or two songs, but yeah, it
So,
was.
how did you pick up the pieces from there? I mean, I
Hmm.
think a lot of people at that point would have said, "You know what, man? This is a stupid business to be
Hmm.
in, and I gave
Yeah,
it the old college try, but I'm out of here." How did you? First of all, why did you continue in music? Because it sounds like a
yeah,
terrible couple of years.
yeah.
And second of all, once you decided to continue, how did you pick up the pieces and move on?
I don't know. It kind of makes me emotional when you ask that question because um, I really don't know. You know, I when they dropped me that second time, you know, I just didn't know anything else. You know, all I knew was music. All I knew was playing, and it just didn't seem over. It just didn't seem, for some reason, I don't know how to answer it. It just didn't seem over. Um, I just lived for that, for playing, you know. And when they dropped me that second time, it was almost, yeah, it was like, are you kidding me? You know, after all this, you know, are you freaking kidding me, man? But on the other end, it was like, finally, like, we are free. Let's just do whatever the fuck we want. Like, God, like, I don't, you know, don't have to answer to anybody. Yeah, we got to raise money and pay for it and figure it out, but what did we do right away? We recorded, you know, uh, an album, a full album, like an acoustic album with my friend
Was this
Chris
the
Steele.
self-titled one?
This was one called "This Is Blue."
This is Blue. Okay.
Yeah, and it came out before the self-titled record. Um, and thank God we had it. And we were able to do it, and that album is what led into um, my relationship with Vanguard Records, who was the kind of the much smaller, much more, um, much better experience
Yeah.
than Geffen, than the kind of the big machine.
Now, ultimately, the most important relationship for an artist is not really with these labels or a manager or anybody. It's the relationship that you hopefully develop with listeners. You've obviously developed a deep and large and abiding relationship, and with a huge following. When did you first start to notice that happening? Like people who were just regular music listeners who liked the good stuff. When did you notice them start to kind of catch on to your music? Was there a specific show or tour or moment or album where you could kind of say to yourself, "Wow, it looks like this is starting to work"?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think was there's one show in particular where I really think that it was like a big milestone for us. We were, just touring hard, van and trailer, rent a car, whatever it was, just touring like a lot, like I don't know, probably like 250 days of the year, just
Yeah.
really grinding it. Um, and we were starting to pick up some momentum after that self-titled album, and we were coming down here to Denver to play the Bluebird Theater, which is one of my favorite theaters. Beautiful little theater, about 700 cap, room, and we sold it out, and it was like, oh my God, like I cannot believe that we sold out this room. Like it was a feeling of like that was the show we sold out in advance,
Yeah.
and people knew the words, and
Yeah.
it was like that was a big show. But then it was I think it was the feeling of like, going, like knowing, like, okay, knowing that when I go to Baltimore and play the 8x10, right, which was this epic little club in Baltimore.
Still there, man. I live
Oh my
40
God,
minutes away from it.
I
Yep, still
love
there.
that. Do you really? Oh, you live? Where are you at?
I'm in Prince George's County,
Okay,
Maryland, just down the road.
okay.
Yeah.
So that, like, knowing that we could go there and it's gonna sell out, you know,
Yeah.
knowing we could go to Philly and play, World Cafe, the ups, and it's gonna sell out, and going back to these places and seeing the same people come back every time, In
Mhm.
those days, I was, after the show, just trying to meet everybody, and starting to see familiar faces. It was like, holy shit, people are coming out. This is crazy, that's I think it was just that era, that time frame. But that Bluebird show in particular was a very special moment, very special moment.
So to reach that point, I mean, you end up releasing this music that is really connecting with people. In retrospect, those couple of years that you spent in LA making those two albums that in theory were all for naught, what were some of the skills as a songwriter, like technical skills that you picked up with all that? It's like, to me, it sounds like it was a bummer, but also you had like this key to a batting cage that you could go in and take swings in as much as, like a lot of swings before anyone was watching. So what were some of the skills that you picked up at that time from that period that would lead to kind of a fruitful emergence later on?
I think that the main thing was because we couldn't control the aspect of like music not coming out. We had our hands tied. We just hit the road, and we toured with anybody and everybody. It was like toured with Johnny Lang to Stevie Nicks to Jimmy Cliff to uh, the Wailers, to Colby Calais, to Matisyahu, to, you know,
Wow.
it was just like it was just like we just played in front of so many different types of crowds, you know, from old people, listening supper clubs to wild young crowds, and I think that was the thing that not only kept me alive, kept my spirits up and going, to feel that energy that we all live for from live music, you know, um, every night, even though that was the time to do it. I was young, and you know, thank God I had a lot of energy, um, and it was just, I think, playing in all different types of scenarios, and also just playing, how do you get better at your craft? You just do it all the time. And I think being around different musicians, different crowds, playing every night, just really just we became tighter and tighter as a group, and um, that in turn inspired different songs and kept everything moving. I really think that the root of it was just playing and building my experience to the point where I wasn't affected by what room I walked into. You know, it could be a cafe or it could be a theater. It could be opening for a person where nobody's really interested in you and they're
Yeah.
all looking at their phones to people being stoked about you and learning to not be so much affected by those external factors, just getting better at your craft, honing your energy was what was important, you know, and learning that that's at the root of it all. It's something I still deal with today. It's something I still try to practice and get after even today. You know, it's still the same lesson.
Talk to me about this new record, "In and Through the Body," that you made with Brad Cook at the production helm. How was this one? Just from like a nuts and bolts perspective of how you put it together, how you wrote the songs, how you got them down
Yeah.
and recorded. How was this one a bit different than the records you've made in the past?
Well, I mean, just first off, like it was one of the greatest experiences of my life doing it with Brad. He's just such an incredible person to be around, and just totally ripped open the doors to my creativity, and you know, just shattering the rules and just being so incredibly inspiring and skillful. It was just like an incredible experience. Um, but to
So
get
what would
into
be an example then, like of him, like
yeah,
kind of opening you up creatively and kind of taking away past rules that you would kind of live by? What would be like a specific example in the creative
a
process that you can
specific
remember?
example would be like a specific example would be um, for instance, like the first time that we worked together, just to see if we even, it was before we even made the decision to do a record together. It was just like, let's just see if
Hmm.
we like are, you know, vibe with each other. Um, I just like found an idea on the guitar, um, and we laid that loop over and over, and we just built off that. And it was like a 9 minute idea, you know. There wasn't any type of uh, uh, sticking to a structure, I would say, you know, verse chorus bridge thing or this or what can we do, and it was pure creativity. It was, there are no rules. You want to get on that keyboard, turn it on, turn the fucking knobs, and it doesn't matter. It's like spending time with one idea for hours,
Hmm.
um, you know, was something very different for me to be around. I am very much like, let's throw this. It's like, it wasn't that way with Brad. Brad was like, let's try, let's explore to the depth of this idea. And sometimes you do it and it doesn't work. You know, you spend 3 hours
Yeah.
on a thing, it doesn't work. But that commitment to that creative energy was something so inspiring to be around. Um,
Hmm.
Throwing out all the rules and all the formalities, it was almost this like Zen thing of like, don't think at all, just feel and go for it. Um, that was super inspiring. You know, I had, you know, I record my own stuff at home here and have a very humble little, you know, setup. But so I had recorded a lot of different demos. I brought them to Brad and said, you know, here's what I got. And he's like, I want to hear every single thing that you have recorded. I don't care if it's 30 seconds or it's 9 minutes. He's
Oh
like,
wow.
I want to hear everything. So the first day we literally I opened up my laptop and played every single idea that I had. You know, it was probably like 30 to 35 different things.
Hmm.
And we didn't say anything till the end. And we just listened to it back to back to back, didn't even say a word. And then he wrote down the songs that he or ideas that he wanted to go after, and so did I, and we kind of matched those up and okay, let's focus on these. But in no way were we stuck to that. There were many things as the process was going over that month where just to like have a break, I'd start meddling with something or he'd start meddling with something and we'd be like, "Oh, let's build off that." So there was so it was a mixed process. There were some songs that I brought, but most of the songs that I brought, my demos that I built out, he totally reconstructed them. We didn't use a lot of elements that
Sure.
I had had, um, and I kind of liked that. I liked him kind of like destroying in a way, you know, my vision of it. You know, it was just a month of all these different walls coming down for me as an
Yeah.
artist, and he was able to like, no, let's look at this differently. Let's look at, you know, it was just a very inspiring, very inspiring. But it was a mixed batch of songs. There were songs that we wrote together from scratch, and then there was songs that I had brought in that he reconstructed and kind of re-recorded.
I find most fruitful projects to be kind of mixed method like that because what that speaks to is it usually speaks to, and here comes this word again for the second time in this conversation, a lack of rigidity with, or a lack of fealty to some kind of like some ideology you have about of how things should be created. It's like,
Mm,
well, you have this idea of how things should be, and then you're met on the ground with how things just damn are,
mm,
man. And you better, if you don't just immediately flip and start working with how things as they are,
mm.
you're going to end up with a bummer. And so,
Yeah,
by definition, if you, when working with things as they are, by definition, you end up with a project of a mixed methodology. It takes different ways to get to that musical reality.
yeah, it really does. And for somebody like me who there's a little bit of fear in that too, because, you know, like there's no, all of us want some solid ground to stand on, you know, and
Yeah.
rigidity kind of sometimes gives that to us in a way, you know, but
Yeah.
it's
Well, it
not a
gives us the
healthy way to
illusion of it at
stand.
least,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it gives
Yeah.
us the illusion of it, you know. And when you do enter that place of no rigidity, sometimes there is this sense of, whoa, I'm what is there gonna be any like form to this eventually, you know?
Yeah.
Even like with the record I'm making now, there has been that as well because I have been in this very open kind of space of that's kind of been my practice at this point in my creative cycle. Um, but there has been a lot of fear that goes with it too, you know, like and uh, you have to take care of that fear. You know, you have to be compassionate with that fear and not cut it off. Or at least for me, I don't want to cut it off. I want to be with it. Okay, that's part of this. That's part of this journey as well. That fear and of not having solid ground at some point in the process. But um, yeah, it's just interesting how all those emotions run together um, when you enter that space, you know, of trying to break down those walls, enter that space of no rigidity. There are so many different feelings that come
Yeah.
with it, you know.
Well, and that's how you know you're making a work of art rather than, a work of kitsch of some
Yeah,
kind.
it's
So,
true. It's true. It's true. It's true. It's part of.
um, well, listen, brother, it's been I could talk to you for about 3 hours, man, but this has been
Oh
a
man,
pleasure rapping
such a
with you. Thanks
pleasure.
for being on the show.
Such a
Appreciate it.
pleasure. I'm just yeah, really honored and I really enjoyed the conversation and
Same.
hopefully we can yeah meet in person one day.
Absolutely. Here, I'm gonna